France's education minister has announced that the abaya will be banned in state-run schools as of next week. The loose-fitting garment, worn mostly by Muslim women, has been a point of contention in France. The staunchly secular country enforces a strict ban on the wearing of visible religious signs and symbols in state institutions. Politicians on both sides claim the abaya violates the country's secular stance, but Muslim groups argue the abaya itself isn't a religious garment. France banned women from wearing a headscarf in state institutions in 2004 and face veils in public spaces in 2010. It went even further in 2021 when its constitutional court upheld the controversial anti-separatism law. It's a bill that enforces secularism in the civil services and gives the government the right to exert control over charities and NGOs. Critics argue the bill only singled out Muslims, allowing the French government to crack down on religious education and organisations. The mounting restrictions have again sparked outrage amongst France's Muslim community, a population estimated at over 5 million people. To give us some analysis on this, Linda Hioki joins us from Marglaj in Bosnia-Herzegovina. She's a political analyst who specialises in Islamophobia. And from Williamstown in the United States, Farid Hafez. He's a senior researcher at Georgetown University. Thank you both for joining us here on Straight Talk. Linda, I want to throw this straight to you first. France is an openly secular country. So is this latest move really any surprise?
Of course, it's not a surprise. I think that we have all been following the developments in the country for 2 decades now already. 2004, the hijab was banned in the schools, and then 2015, a girl was banned from the school for wearing a long skirt. So this newest ban on long dresses, or as they want to define it as an abaya, is not a surprise at all to me, I would say.
Not a surprise, but disappointing all the same, Linda?
Exactly. It's very disappointing. And I would say that I would actually see here a sort of like a progress of unveiling the Muslim woman or the Muslim female bodies, which kind of like reminds us of the colonial practices that were done, for instance, in Algeria. And I'm not so sure if this is really about secularism as such or protecting even children from being identified as Muslims at the first glance, because at the same time, we're talking about a very vague description of a long dress that can be worn by anybody at the same time. I mean, who is there to define what kind of dresses we're talking about, which color, what kind of patterns can they have, etc.?
You make a point there that I want to ask you about, Farid. The Education Minister says this decision is going to benefit school children because it ensures that school-age children aren't being singled out by their religion. What do you make of that reasoning? Isn't that a good thing? We're not singling anybody out.
Well, absolutely. That's how it sounds, right? And I think, that's also the strategy of those politicians in power who are not, nominally speaking, from the far right, who usually say, okay, we just want to, push the Muslims out from Europe. We just don't want to have them here. Those politicians who are in power usually draw on these kinds of logics because the idea that they present themselves with is, okay, we are actually here to save the Muslim woman, right, from bad Islam. So in other words, something that we know from colonial times, that this is exactly what colonial empires did once they colonized Muslim territories and were arguing, we are here to save the Muslim woman from the bad Muslim man. It is exactly what we are witnessing these days, not only in France, but in many other European countries too. But it is really, at the end of the day, and I fully agree with what Linda just said, I mean, at the end of the day, this is nothing else but a way to define what is good and bad in a very private sphere on behalf of the state. So I think it also shows us a new authoritarian character that we have. And I think what societies at large should be worried about, even beyond the Muslim women in specific, is to what extent do they want the state to interfere in their private issues? And I think that's worrying in itself in terms of the authoritarian wave that we see across the world.
Linda, I can see you nodding your head vigorously there to what Farid is saying. He said they're, just another way of pushing Muslims out, of making them feel unwanted. But isn't this France saying everyone is wanted, but if you're going to be in our society, you have to follow our rules?
Well, rules are, of course, theoretically speaking, something that every society can benefit from. But we are speaking here about what they are calling clothes that ostensibly signify a religious affiliation. And in fact, if a Christian girl comes with a long dress to the school, is she going to be kicked out of the school the same way as the Muslim woman? Because if her name is Aisha and the other girl's name is Laura, where do we draw the line? I mean, and at the same time, we are now talking about visible markers such as clothing. Where do we go next if we are trying to protect the children not to be singled out? Are we going to be banning Muslim-sounding names? Are we going to be banning certain languages spoken on the schoolyard only because they can signify a person's religious affiliation? I mean, at the end of the day, you cannot strip a person of their identity in this manner.
You make a point there, Linda, that I was thinking myself, because I have plenty of loose, free-flowing, nice cotton dresses that come to my wrists and reach to my ankles. They're bought from a high street, any sort of high street shop. What sort of specifications are there to distinguish a dress that I could buy on the high street from an religious garment?
I wouldn't say that there are any specifications, because an abaya as such is a cultural garment. And what we are talking about here is just a woman covering her body with a long dress. So if a female person wants to cover her body for certain reasons, be it whatever, it doesn't matter what kind of a pattern it has. If it has a Middle Eastern looking kind of a cut or whatever, it's still a long garment. So I think that if I'm buying a dress from some, let's say, fashion store that has long sleeves, as you also, Melinda, said, it can be used as an abaya, I would say. It just doesn't, its name is not abaya.
Farid, why do you think this is happening now? There was no particular incident that has, precipitated this announcement. So what do you make of the timing?
Well, absolutely important question, because I think there are several aspects to this. First of all, it is clearly a distraction from the larger problems that the French government finds itself in at the moment. France, the Macron government, is in a huge political crisis of legitimacy. There is a huge economic crisis and this political crisis. So it is clearly, whenever these Islam issues come up once in a while, you can assume that there is a bigger problem that they are trying to distract from. So I would say this is one aspect. But the other aspect is really an institutional and structural one, which is if you look into the Islamophobic policies that we have been witnessing, especially since the very first Macron government, we can clearly see that the way Islamophobia materializes is to basically try to destroy and to strip off any kind of Muslim visibility in the public space. So, from the way of cracking down on Muslim organizations, mosques, stripping Muslims off of their funds, and now targeting also Muslim women, first with the hijab and now with the abaya, is clearly a sign that the way they see the future of France is a France without any Muslim visibility. And this is how we see Islamophobia playing out these days.
Linda, do you think that the timing of this is very politically motivated? Is this France trying to court support from right-leaning voters?
I guess this is pretty much always the tendency that these kind of decisions come from the right-wing fragments of the politics. I mean, the left has criticized this decision in France, and the criticism has been about policing the clothing and asking about the boundaries, how far we are actually going with this. And I would, of course, agree with that. So, however, I'm not an expert on the polls at the moment in France, so I cannot really say anything about that in terms of how far they are going or what kind of votes they are needing at the moment.
We're almost out of time, but I just want to broaden this out to Islamophobia in general. Farid, there have been numerous Quran burning incidents, not in France specifically, but across Europe. Are you seeing a broader anti-Islam sentiment across the continent, or do you think that's too simplistic?
I would say it's too simplistic, to be honest, because it is something that has been there for a very, very long time. And, at some point of time, it's also, the question is like, when do we discuss what? Like, the whole Quran burning has sparked huge outrage in a lot of the Muslim countries. What I would love to see is outrage now with this government policy that is specifically attacking Muslim women in France. And I think, this is something that is hurting a lot of Muslim folks much, much more than any burning of the Quran, right? I mean, when you see those pictures of Muslim women taking off their hijab before they entering the school ground, I mean, this is humiliating to an extent I could not even imagine living in a country like that, So,
Linda, before we finish up, I just want to ask you that question as well. Do you see a broader sense of Islamophobia across the continent that this perhaps new ban is a reflection of, or is this just the way the continent is going and it's a sign, unfortunately, of the times?
Yeah, I think that exactly what Farid also said. This is a continuous phenomenon, or even a symptom of Europe's condition. And numerous studies show this. And the mere fact that we are here today discussing again this topic shows exactly the point. Islamophobia is there. It has been there before. We already pointed out also the connection to colonial times, so it's not something new. So we'll just have to see where we're going next, but it doesn't look very good for France.
I dare say it will not be the last time we have you both on Straight Talk. Your analysis is always greatly appreciated. Linda Hioki and Farid Hafez, thank you so much for your time.